we've discussed this in the past on the podcast. There's a concept of dealer code, of a certain way to act when you do a deal. Can you describe your interpretation of what the dealer code is in your experience in the industry?
Well, that's something that, not everybody follows a dealer code. I mean, like I said at the beginning, it was so honorable. You could leave your watches out. When you did a deal and shook a hand, you did a deal. Today, some people aren't as honorable about doing the deal as they say they do it, and they don't. And
welcome back to the Collectability Podcast. Today we are joined by Matthew Bain, a man who needs no introduction and whose name is synonymous with vintage watches here in the U.S. and abroad. Before we dive in, here's Matt's official bio. Matthew Bain has been in the watch business since 1989. He became interested in watches in 1985 when he attended American University in Washington, D.C. Matthew followed his father's footsteps as he was one of the largest watch collectors in the United States. What started as a hobby became a full-time business in 1989, and ever since then, Matt has been buying and selling watches. And Matt owned a watch store located in Miami Beach from 1990 to 2006 and now operates out of an office in the same area. His reputation in the trade is outstanding, and he acts as a consultant for many watch dealers and for major auction houses such as Sotheby's and Christie's. Whether it's an antique 1880 pocket watch, a vintage 1950s wristwatch, or a modern-day timepiece, his brand and technical knowledge is vast. He has curated major watch collections, and several of his timepieces are found in watch museums, such as the Patek Philippe Museum in Geneva. With that said, welcome, Matt.
thank you very much. And want to thank you and honor getting interviewed by you. And I remember you as a young kid working at Sotheby's, and I used to come into the previews, and you'd help me out, showing me watches, and had great conversations. And you worked for Patek Philippe, and I knew you there. Then I knew you at a couple other companies, and we've always had a great relationship.
And I remember meeting you in the 1990s, and my first impression is you're one of the nice guys. You were so kind as a kid starting out in the business. You're quite young at the time too, but you were always there to offer some advice, help me learn the business, and I want to thank you for that.
No, not a worry. And I always loving sharing my knowledge with people and collectors and new dealers, and as much knowledge as I can, because it's great for the watch community.
And I just have to say, we've had some high-profile guests on this show, but we have never had a fan club show up. So through the window here, I am seeing like a vast amount of people who came to cheer you on today. So I'm just waving to them off camera. I want to say thank you for being here to cheer on Matt. And for the record, they're not collectability fans. They are Matt Bain fans.
Well, it's kind of funny because they were my friends at American University, and last night we had a fraternity reunion, and they just reminded me of a funny story. Back in the late 80s, the Swatch market was a very big collectible market. They were being bought all over these department stores, and they would limit you to 1 or 2 pieces only, or 5 pieces only. So these guys right over here, my fan club, I'd sent them out to the department stores so we could get as many swatches as possible, and we sold them in Italy at the time. So we were buying them for like, say, $30, $40, selling them for $80, and we were splitting the profits. So these guys were a big start of my career.
That is impressive. I can imagine the army of Bane really made a difference at that time.
Oh, yeah. I had like these soldiers out there going to, Macy's and Neiman Marcus, and we were buying all the swatches up. It was an interesting market, kind of like an artificial market, but it worked for like a year or two. So, but I really got started from my father, as you said, was a watch collector, and he was actually in the furniture business as a full-time job, and he got started by a trade. That's how this whole thing started. My dad traded a piece of jewelry of my mom's to my mom's sister for antique pocket watch. My dad was enamored by this American pocket watch that my aunt had. It had like a hunting case, multicolor with a deer on it, the typical American engraved pocket watches. So they did a trade. My dad got the pocket watch. This is probably like the mid to late 70s. And I was there. I was on the dining table of her house, It was a big thing. We were all like clapping,
And it was a family deal.
It was a family deal.
I love it.
And from there on, my dad started collecting pocket watches. From that day on, and then he ended up going to a watch show. We're all familiar. It's called the NAWCC, National Association of Watch and Clock Collectors. He goes to the show, and all of a sudden he sees all these people starting to deal in wristwatches. And then that's where the wristwatch thing took off. And he basically, shared all his knowledge. I was a young kid, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, watching him do this. I was not really into it like I am what I became.
Mm-hmm.
I had like a normal life. I played sports. I went to school. I went to college. And one day I came home from a college break, and we're at the dining table, and I see some of the wristwatches on the table. I'm like, I really like these things. They're very cool, Dad. So I started going around. I was going to school in D.C. and started going around looking for watches. And that's where it started. And I was in banking right out of college. I had a banking job making about $25,000 a year, which was not a bad salary in 1987, 88. It was like a decent salary. And I started buying some watches, $50 watches, $100 watches, $200, $300, very inexpensive watches. And I accumulated about 15, 20 watches, but I ran out of money. I had no more money, and I said, what am I going to do? How can I buy more watches? So I went to my very first watch show.
Mm-hmm.
My very first watch show, and I put a price on each watch. I took a little piece of tape. It's like $150, $175, $200.
These American watches or Swiss
No,
watches?
they mostly.
Or everything?
So my very first watch I bought, which I actually sold before this show. It was a Universal Genève Tri-Complex.
Oh, nice.
That was the very first watch I bought.
And steel?
And stainless steel. It was like black. I'll never forget the watch. It was a black tachometer bezel, 1960s version, and a black dial. And but anyway, I took all these watches to the watch show. I opened up this roll. The watches were gone in about 20 seconds. People grabbing them, people scratching their hands, blood. I mean, it was so obviously I had no idea what I was doing. I way undersold the watches because these guys were grabbing them like crazy. I said, all right, I'll go back to D.C. Let me go around till I was going around to like jewelry stores.
Mm-hmm.
People always ask me, do you get these at estate sales? And I never really bought many watches at estate sales. I never really went. Again, I accumulated another 15, 20 watches, run out of money again. I go to my next watch show. And it's more expensive. Now the $200 watch became the $500 watch.
And you're still in college at this point?
Oh, now I'm in banking.
Okay, you're in banking.
We have no cell phones.
Mm-hmm.
Communication is a lot slower. I'm working with payphones, leaving messages on people's machines. Hi, Frank, let's meet and look at the watch tomorrow. And then don't hear for 2 days because maybe he doesn't hear the message for 2 days. So I accumulate another grouping of watches, go to my next watch show. Again, gone in 3 seconds. So that got me in the taste of doing this watch business. But what really put me over the top, that I went into this business full time, I started getting smarter. And in the Washington Post, I ran a little classified ad, watch collector, buying Patek Philippe's, buying Rolex, buying Cartier. And I ran this little teeny ad, like an inch big in the classified section. I got calls. I started buying watches. I get a call from a Latin gentleman one day, and he goes, I have this watch, Patek Philippe. And I'm like, okay, and it has like these countries on it of the world. And I'm like, really? Like,
let's talk.
Yeah, and it ended up being a Patek Philippe World Time. So I didn't really have the experience to buy a Patek Philippe World Time. I'd been only doing this like a year.
No, is this the 2523? Or the smaller?
No, the
14,
big one.
15.
The big one.
So a 2523.
Yeah, 2523 with a double crown, map of North and South America. Oh, there's a little guy in a canoe in the ocean there. Like, and
so this is an $8 million watch today.
Well,
in enamel. I'll continue your story.
So anyway, I call my dad up because I said, Dad, I think you have to come up here. He was living in West Palm Beach at the time because I don't know how to buy this thing, and he says it has countries of the world, and there was no modern Patek Philippe World Time at the time. So he does come up, and we're supposed to meet at a TGA Fridays at Tyson's Corner at 4 o'clock. My dad flies up. The guy does not show up. So I had his phone number. Calling him. By 7 o'clock that night, we were meeting at 4 p.m. 7 o'clock that night, he finally picks up his phone. I don't remember his name, but say his name is Jerry. I'm like, Jerry, what's going on? We're supposed to meet at Fridays at 4. Oh, I'm sorry. I got real busy with work. You know, it was not even a big deal. So he goes, why don't you come over and look at the watch? So we sat there till midnight, and we bought the watch. And I gave my 2-week notice at my banking job that the next day.
That is a beautiful story. It all started with a tiny classified ad.
Yeah, exactly. And the trade my dad did with the aunt. And so take the watch. We went back to my dad's hotel room, and we're looking at the watch, and you'll never believe it. And with all this restoration stuff people are talking about today, and, oh, did you polish it? Did you restore the dial? So there was like a little, like on the edge of the dial, a little rust spot. My dad took the bezel off and took like a little Q-tip and just rubbed it, and the rust came right off. So like whoever owns that watch today, it was restored by my dad with the Q-tip. All right.
And you didn't have to wait 2 years to have the work done.
So going to the market of it, you said It's an $8 million watch today. At the time, we held the watch for about a good year and a half, and it was a bad time for the watch business because the Gulf War was happening, about 89, 90, 91. And it was a struggle to get, I think, $180,000 for the watch at the time. And today it is probably like you said, could be an $8 to $10 million watch today.
It's amazing.
So that's one that maybe I should have kept, but again, I had to keep going because I needed to start my business. And that propelled me into getting more capital and starting the business. And my dad actually had been doing business with Massimo Baracca at the time, and sets me up in a blind partnership. I didn't even know Massimo that well. He says, no, he's a good guy. I buy watches from him. I sell him watches sometimes. And we became partners for about 15 years, Massimo and I. And then about 2006, 2007, we split up because we're still good friends. We still do some business deals together. And we were just at different paths of our life. He was like about 10, 12 years older than me, and I was still grinding it out, and he was, slowing down, so.
Do you remember the first time you met Massimo?
I do, yeah. He came up to Washington, D.C. We got a little bigger. From our little classified ad, I started running a bigger ad in the Washington Post, and we opened up like a little kind of satellite office, and Washington, D.C. was filled with some really, really, a lot of nice watches because of, the diplomats and the transient people there, and it was a really good area to buy very nice watches at the time. I don't know about today, but back then it was a very good buying for vintage watches.
Going back to the 1980s in particular, what was dealer culture like during that period of time? I mean, it was a world before cell phones, before the internet,
right.
And what was it like?
It was really good. It was very pure. A lot more passion. Like people get a watch in their hand and go, wow. And there's like a lot more passion, I think, about collecting. I think compared to today is more, it's become so big. Like if my dad passed away in 1993, and if he could see the values today compared to back then, like that $180,000 watch that is $8 million today. So there's so much more money involved. So I think the money has changed the passion a little bit. So I think it was a lot more pure and passionate about collecting 1980s. And I was going to wear it today, and I brought it, and I didn't. We all wore like these fishing vests. Mm-hmm. We go to watch shows.
Dealer vest. I love it.
Yeah. And I was going to wear it, and I forgot to bring it out of my hotel today.
How many watches can you put in one of those vests?
A lot. I just stuff them up, and we have fanny packs on, and we were just buying and selling. And it's funny because like Geneva today, I remember going to Geneva for the watch sales. And say I went to a watch show here in the United States, and a guy had a Patek Philippe asking $5,000 for it. And then I went to a Geneva auction, and I saw a watch just sell right there at the Geneva auction for $15,000. I got on a payphone immediately, called that dealer. Do you still have that Patek Philippe for $5,000? I'll buy it. Sure. And so that's what I'm saying. Information was a lot slower then, and you could get deals because information flow was so much slower with no cell phones, with no TikToks, no Instagrams, no auction results instantly in 3. I mean, I used to get a fax copy of the results like maybe 4 or 5 days after the sale, and then you have to go and look on the fax copy, and so information has changed, and technology has changed the business compared to the 1980s. I really loved buying 1980s because you can walk into a jewelry store and you never knew what you're going to find, and there was hope.
Yes.
That you're going to find a cool watch. And I walked into so many stores and found great watches. Just a normal jewelry store that, they just got a watch and trade. And the time frame. So if we go back to time, say you were born in, say, 1920 something, 1930 something. You have success in the 1940s and 50s as a young entrepreneur or businessman, and you bought a Patek Philippe or Rolex or collectible watch. So in about 1980, what were you, like 70, 80 years old, and you paid, $300 for a Patek Philippe back then, you could buy from the original owner. You're giving him $10,000 for a watch, he paid $300. He didn't care about the watch as much. So back then you could really buy from the original families a lot more than today. And the original owner, and he could tell the story, or she could tell the story about the watch. Like I gave that to my husband in 1954 for our anniversary, so you could really buy from original owners, and that was a lot of fun by getting all these barn finds that are not as prevalent today.
There's less and less of
right.
them
So
out
in
there.
the 80s, it was just tons of that, and the stories behind the watches it was amazing.
I've always loved how many stories you have, and you're not only well-spoken, you're humble, because when you share a watch story, you're talking about 2523 World Time, or some of the most important references that have ever surfaced in the Patek Philippe world, and of course, Rolex, AP, you name the brand. And you've been doing this now for over 4 decades. It's amazing. I felt the same way. Forever, I felt like I was the youngest person in the industry.
I did too at one point.
And then I woke up one day and I wasn't. And every day that goes past now, I feel like I'm becoming more of a veteran. And we're the same generation, but I consider you more of a veteran than I am. So what have you seen over the last 40 years that have changed the most? And tell us some stories of some of the highs and some of the lows. I'm particularly curious about the mistakes that you've made.
It's funny because I tell the younger dealers, if you don't make a mistake or lose money on something, then you're not doing business. And mistakes, it kills you, like I've bought a fake before, I've lost money on, or, you're buying in a certain market, the market changes, or, a lot of mistakes that I've made, but the best thing, if you learn from them, like anything, makes you stronger, makes you smarter, and you become a better dealer. And, today, you are so open to the public today with Instagram and all the social media, and you see it. There's guys out there just waiting for you to make a mistake and to just trash you in a minute. And today I'm so very careful about what I do and what I'm buying, and, dot the I's, cross the T's, and really go through these watches with a fine-tooth comb because, like I said, in the 80s, you were buying a lot of virgin watches from the original owners, and now a lot of these watches have been through things, different restorations, or people have learned to make some incredible fakes with some technology, so I'm very careful about buying my merchandise and when I'm picking watches out. But there's been a lot of highs too, just some incredible stories of watches I bought that I didn't even know what I was doing. One time, I bought a Cartier. This is a great story. I was very young. I just became partners with Massimo. Massimo was a a Cartier expert. He wrote a couple books on Cartier, and it was the summertime. Every summer he went to Sardinia for 3 months, and I'm in Miami, grinding it out and walking to the store, and I buy this typical looking tank Cartier. It was a little bigger than normal, and paid about $7,000 for it. I figured it was like a $10,000, $12,000 watch. Put it in the safe. Massimo comes back after a Sardinia thing, and it's still in the safe for a few weeks. It was just like a normal, like a tank, like. So finally I show Massimo the watch. I'm like, oh, this is that tank I bought, in Boca Raton, and looks at it. He goes, do you know what this is? You do understand? This is the waterproof Cartier tank. And it's pictured in a book in in a glass of water. It's it's a very rare. Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it. I've never seen it.
Yeah, there's
personally.
been about 3 or 4 of them sold at auction in the last 30, 40 years. Anyway, it's pictured in a book, and it's the way the case is constructed. It was waterproof, and we put it in the sale of Cartier that Patrizzi had. It was just a Cartier.
The Art of Cartier sale.
Yeah, the Art of Cartier sale was in there, and it brought like $170,000.
That was a good day.
It was a really good day.
Wow.
But the point of the story is sometimes we know too much. And when I didn't know what I was doing. Maybe if I knew that was a $170,000 watch, I might have got nervous buying it. I'd be, are you sure that's the right price? Or I didn't know what I was buying. So when we know too much sometimes, it could be a negative.
And that has changed the market, because now with the internet, everyone knows everything 24/7.
They know everything 24/7.
The market's shifted.
But they know everything, but some of what they know and what they're saying is not even true.
This is true.
And that's what I don't like about today, is that there's a lot of people out there spreading certain things about watches, and they weren't there when the watch was born. That's another thing. Like sometimes something is set that should be on a certain watch, and it becomes gospel. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And maybe someone went into Patek Philippe and got a certain thing they made in 1940 that they wanted in 1950. They wanted a certain style dial or case or whatever, and had it made, and it's so that's what I don't like about some of the information that's being spread out today. And it's great, though. We have so much more information than we did in the 80s, and we do know a lot more. I mean, and I love that, because I believe in a lot of the information, but sometimes I just have to disagree. And it happens more probably in the Rolex world than the Patek world, because Rolex did all kinds of funky things. They take a 1960s watch, but they had a 1950s dial there, and they just assembled the watch and put it out for sale. So Patek Philippe, I think, has a lot better record keeping, the archives, it's much more set and a lot easier, to determine.
In the world of Patek Philippe, dial changes were considered the norm. We saw it with 3970s, and even going back further with ellipses, like 3738, even 3605s.
Right.
Dial changes were encouraged to make a sale at point of sale, and were done by the local distributors and also by Patek in Geneva. And now those watches don't archive, which is what, as a dealer, I find this very frustrating.
Very frustrating.
Have you had those experiences?
Especially like the last year or so. I don't know. The archive department, I think, changed. And the archive changed. I think today's archive, the actual piece of paper, I don't love it compared to the old one. The old one had like
a certain charm,
cursive writing, and it looked like an old certificate. And today it looks like a computer printout. And they're being a lot tougher, like you said, when dials were changed, and it's not right. I think, now I'm not sure, you worked at Patek Philippe, and I'm not sure this is a strategy of Patek Philippe, but maybe you now send it in for service and they charge you some thousands and then they give you the archive. I'm not sure that's happening or not yet.
I know, you're paying for the archive, 500 Swiss francs.
And that went up too. It was a 75 Swiss franc.
Forever.
Then they went up to 500, but I have had issues lately with some archives that, and we're just trying to figure out. And what I wish Patek Philippe would do is, okay, it doesn't archive because it used to have a black dial. Now it has a silver dial. Or, hey, the sweep second hand should have a Dauphine look on it, not a straight look. Things like that. I wish they would give us information so the watch could be remedied. And made correct and then get archived.
Or in the past, remember under remarks, this is only like 5 to 10 years ago, under case remarks, they might be like dial not mentioned, or sometimes they would get so granular they would discuss a hand or a particular part. But now it's just a rejection. So I'm like, I really hope that will change over time. We're not here to criticize Patek Philippe, but when a watch doesn't archive, it kills the watch.
Right.
So I just hope that dial not mentioned becomes the norm again.
Right. Or they used to put type for the dial. I don't know why they put type. I don't understand that. Not mentioned is a little better of a term. It is a problem because these watches are good. The dial might have got changed in the 80s, 90s, 70s, 60s, whatever, and it's not archiving. And like you said, who's going to buy a watch that doesn't archive?
Yeah. And there's some great pieces out there. It's an interesting time to buy some bargain watches too that don't archive, because I'm confident in the future things could change. But knock on wood, we'll see what happens.
I know someone that bought I just told a story. They bought a 2499 in Geneva, and it had a silver dial, and the collector asked if they could make a black dial for it. It was in their right out on display, and Patek Philippe did it for him. It has the papers, everything, and they won't archive the watch today.
Ugh.
And he asked them to make the black dial, and it has the original papers and everything. He bought it in 1983, 84, 2499.
That's heartbreaking. And that's an example where a lack of an archive could swing a price 7 figures.
No, for
Easily.
sure. Absolutely.
So let's talk about some of the Patek Philippe watches that are in the museum today that might have Matt Bain provenance.
Well, there's one in particular that is kind of a funny story. I bought it probably about 94, 95, 96, around that period. And it's a stainless steel Patek Philippe, and bought it on eBay for about $10,000. It's a rectangular watch with a sector dial, probably from, it was probably like 1939, 1940. Really beautiful watch. I mean, just incredible. I bought it on eBay. It came out of Geneva. I turn around, put it in Christie's Geneva, or Sotheby's, I can't remember the auction house, and it brought about $50,000. And Patek Philippe bought the watch. So I thought it was interesting that I bought it on eBay in Geneva, ship it back to Geneva, and then it sells at an auction in Geneva. So, and this all was like within a 1-year period. And the significance of the story, I'm moving my office. I've been on Miami Beach for 30 years. And every office I've had has been like a reference number. I was at 1655 Meridian Avenue.
Impressive.
And that's a Rolex Explorer 2. Now I'm at 1680 Michigan Avenue. That's a Rolex Submariner. So my next office, I'm moving to Coral Gables, and the suite number is suite number 450.
Incredible.
And that's the stainless steel Patek Philippe reference that's in the Patek Philippe Museum. So that's...
You have to continue this tradition. I love that.
Well, the address is 2121, which is a famous caliber for an Audemars Piguet. It's in the Royal Oak. That was their famous caliber of the Girolgenta Royal Oak. So the address is 2121. The suite number is 450. So like all my offices have always been like watch numbers.
I could tell you're one of those people, and I could understand that when you just walking through New York City, for example, you're looking at license plates, hoping you'll see a 96 or hoping you'll see 2523. I'm always looking for numbers myself. Do you have the same problem?
Sometimes. Yes. And addresses. So I pass this building all the time in Coral Gables, and the address is 6262, and that's a reference for Rolex Daytona. I'm always wanting to take a picture of it, 6262. So I have I own this one vintage Mercedes, and I made the license plate A series, which is the A series of the
Royal Oak.
Yes. Yeah, the Royal Oak. So like,
oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's neat that it says A series, but it stands out though. So, but anyway, that's that.
Way back in, wasn't long ago, actually, back in September of 2017, we were interviewed by Rachel Felder of the New York Times, and it was you, me, Sayori Omuri from...
I remember the interview.
Antiquarian.
It was very nice. It was a fun interview.
And Darren Schnipper.
Right.
The New York Times rented out a was like a suite at a hotel.
Yeah.
And sat the four of us on the couch, like
Yeah, it was
we're all
great.
lined up next to each other, and we just bantered for an hour answering Rachel's great questions. And Rachel's one of my favorite
Yeah, she's a
journalists.
very nice lady. She reached out to me a little bit ago for doing like an Art Basel article, like things to do in Miami. So,
Well, and if you're not familiar with Rachel Felder, I'm going to do a plug for her. Read her book about the history of lipstick.
really?
Absolutely interesting.
Really?
So that's her bestseller. So during this interview, she asked, let's say someone had $10,000 to invest in a vintage watch. Keep in mind, this is back in 2017. What would you advise them to buy? And Darren said, this on the record, I would probably say Patek Philippe. I said, no surprise, I'd say Patek Philippe. Sayori said, Patek Philippe. And then here comes Matt, and you said, I say a Rolex sports model would be a great investment. For example, if you get a basic Rolex GMT or sub for $10,000. Now, I love that you had your own independent mind with this whole Patek bandwagon. Would you still stand by that today?
Well, I made a really good prediction
You were right.
because that $10,000 watch over the years, for really nice examples, became $20,000 and $25,000. So I wasn't off.
You were on the money.
Today, would I make that same call to buy a sport model for $20,000? It's probably safe. Not as good as investment as it was at $10,000.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'd go back to Patek Philippe with you guys today. I believe there's so many undervalued Patek Philippe watches, especially like the form watches, the rectangular Pateks, and they all have the nicknames: the banana, the Monterey, the top hat. They're so cheap right now.
All those 990 calibers.
The 990 caliber right now, and they're beautiful watches. And going back to the 80s, that was like buying a Paul Newman. Buying a banana Patek Philippe, or they call the rectangular one the Tagalino, or all these different nicknames for the rectangulars, they are dirt cheap right now. I find them, now let's talk about dirt cheap. They have to be in nice condition.
Of course.
And that's the key. I think any Patek Philippe from the 50s, 60s, to any era in mint condition, that's what's hard to find is condition today. It's hard to find really, really nice condition. So any Patek Philippe in nice condition, there's ready buyers all around the world for that. I truly believe that. I do it. I find them, and they're easy to sell compared to a rat dog.
That's true. There's so many over-restored pieces, and to find something
very hard today. It's the hardest thing today to find mint condition watches. Are you finding the same?
It's tough.
Yeah.
There's nothing that shows up. Nothing is a general term, I would say. There's not many pieces that show up at auction that are interesting to me. There are some pieces showing up from the public that are exciting, that are truly from grandma and grandpa, but
exactly.
It's getting more difficult year by year. So now I get excited when I find something from the early 2000s that hasn't been touched. Like to find a 50-50 box and papers.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's like our new threshold. So there are opportunities out there. It's just the whole bar has moved in terms of time.
Look what's happened to the reference 3940 in the last couple of years. The early ones, like a yellow gold one, was a $25,000, $30,000 watch for the last
forever
15, 20 years, and now they're double that. And they find an early one with box papers, beautiful dials. It's become highly collectible.
I have two dealer questions for you.
Sure.
First is about the IWJG. Over the years, I've seen you at IWJG shows. Can you share with our listeners who may not be familiar what the International Watch and Jewelry Guild is?
This is a great question.
Tell us about it.
So I told you about the NAWCC.
Yes.
So NAWCC mostly were clock and pocket watch guys. Told you in the early 80s, some wristwatch guys started showing up to buy the wristwatches from the pocket and clock guys because they didn't know what they were doing. So more and more wristwatch guys started showing up at the NAWCC. So there was this gentleman from Texas named Burley, and he was one of those guys. And
larger than life.
Burley
Bullock.
Burley Bullock was a very influential guy in watches. He ran national ads to buy watches on the radio. Buying, Patek Philippe, send them down, and with this Texas accent, and really nice man. So before we started going to NAWCC shows, and we started trading in the lobbies of hotels. I mean, the lobby of a hotel was filled with like hundreds of us just trading watch. I mean, it was like a commodities market. You're going here, I'm buying it from you. I'm selling it over there. It was incredible, like the frenzy of buying and selling. Like when I took those rolls and people grabbing, it was like that. It was so fast moving, buying. I mean, it was amazing. But it was getting a little dangerous. I mean, you're in the middle of the Hyatt Hotel in the lobby, and there's hundreds of watches out, and the general public's also walking through this. So Burley got a good idea. He said, "Come on, everybody, give me $50, and we'll get the conference room." So we got the conference room. We all put $50 in there. It was probably not even $50. I probably it was $10. So we got the conference room. We started trading in there. So before every NAWCC show, they would have them in different cities: Detroit, L.A., Dayton, Ohio, middle of everywhere. And we would just go before, get the conference room. You could open your roll of watches. You can even walk away. We didn't even have cases. It was like a great.
It's just on a table.
There was so much trust with the beginning people in this business. Like, you could put $1 million on this table, no one's going to touch it. It was crazy. Then after about a year or two, one watch got stolen. All right, we got to get cases. Now we got to add $10 more for the show. And so then it just built that way. And it was a great show forever and ever. It really was. Great watches showed up because it was like an arm of the NAWCC. As a matter of fact, we were a chapter of IWJG was a chapter of the NAWCC at one point. But now it's changed.
How low is your IWJG number?
So it's pretty low. It's like 544. And now I think
it's a reference number too, by the way.
Is it?
Yeah,
544?
It's a Patek reference. That's creepy. Okay.
I'm all about the Patek references. But at the beginning, I'd go in with my dad, and I didn't get the card at the beginning. I would have been in the top 50.
Oh.
So I just would go in with him. I was like his son. So anyway, there were great shows. I'm talking some great vintage showed up. Mm-hmm. And then it just started changing and changing. And now today, I find it's very commercial today. Mostly a lot of modern. I don't go to as many of them as I did because it's hard to find my vintage there. But we have a modern arm of my business where we do contemporary watches. So we go and we use it more like a buying tool, and we buy some watches there. And it's mostly modern watches, and sometimes a little treasure comes out, and I get to buy a little something, a little vintage. I get really happy because to see a nice vintage watch come out of there. It's changed quite a bit. It's more like a modern watch show, more or less.
You know, at the shows, and we've discussed this in the past on the podcast, there's a concept of dealer code, of a certain way to act when you do a deal. Can you describe your interpretation of what the dealer code is in your experience in the industry?
Well, that's something that, not everybody follows a dealer code. I mean, like I said at the beginning, it was so honorable. You could leave your watches out. When you did a deal and shook a hand, you did a deal. Today, some people aren't as honorable about doing the deals. They say they do it, and they don't. And what I've learned in the past, I mean, most of the people, they all know me. My method at the show is like, I get there, I'm like one of the first guys in line all the time at the show. Everybody makes fun of me. I say the early bird gets the worm.
So true.
And at every show I go to, I'm always there. Like, if it starts at 8, I'm there at 7:15. And you talk to people on the line, and maybe you do a deal. I've done deals before the shows even start. And when you worked at with Betteridge, you saw a lot of deals happen in hotel rooms.
That's true.
So
the deals were all done the night before.
Yeah, the hotel room. I mean, you set up deals the day before.
You literally fight to get into certain rooms.
Oh, yeah.
It was
it's true.
An inner circle. So.
It was an inner circle. So anyway, the people that aren't honorable in the deals, that kind of happens. I find, like I said, it was the beginning. It was a lot more passion, family-oriented. We all trusted each other. We were like a family. Today, it's more like, business, I want to come and do business, and that's what it's like. It's different, it's a different feeling. But so my method is, since everybody knows me, I loop the watch, and okay, I'll take it, and I put it on the side. They know, and I know it's there for me. Even I pick it up the next day and pay. But if someone I don't know, I usually pay right away because you never know. It's happened to me. Mm-hmm. I bought a watch. I say, I'll take it. I'll be back in a few hours to pay you because I'm rushing around trying to get all the good stuff right now. and they've sold out on me. And that I cannot stand. That is breaking dealer code. And it's funny, there's this like Yiddish word called Maal.
Yes.
Maal. And these guys use this at the show. And once you say Maal, the deal is done. And if you break that, they'll talk bad about you. He broke Maal. And it's the funniest thing, like this Maal word. It's like this Yiddish word, like done deal. It's really funny. So if you break Maal, that is really bad dealer, business. And you get a bad rap for breaking it.
And you now see that with the online chats between the dealers.
Yeah, I've seen that word.
They'll put mazel and that's it.
Yeah.
You do not back out of that deal. And
Yeah.
I had to Google it. I admit I didn't know what it meant.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right. And then I asked some friends and they said, yes, it's done deal.
Yeah.
Under penalty, severe penalty.
I know. I think it started with diamond dealers do this, and then like now there's this like TikToker girl. I don't know if you've seen her. They video her at the shows, and she goes Mazel.
I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, I'll show it to you one day. I'll just text it to you. But she's always using that word. But it's like it is a dealer code word that's out. It's really funny, like that's like, and it's really powerful that word.
And the other thing that I've seen at the shows over the years is when you sell a watch, you put it upside down in the case. So it's still secure, but if it's dialed down in the case, you can't touch it. You can't ask about it. It is sold. And I find that becomes a bit tricky because when you go around a case, the first thing you want to see is the one that's dialed down. So
absolutely.
This is where Mazal's broken.
And not only that, but like I can tell what kind of watch it is basically from the back.
Yeah.
I kind of know what it is, and it's so frustrating to see it turned over. I wish the guy would just put it back in a safe or something, because you see the back of the watch and it's sold and you're just so curious. It's also a good thing. Sometimes it's turned over and the guy doesn't end up doing the deal, like for some reason. And I've bought a lot of watches that way. I'm like, oh, he didn't sell it. No, it's available now. And I've bought watches that way. It shows that end up being a good deal. So it's interesting, the way deals happen and at the shows and on the chats now. Like during COVID, we all learned these chats started amongst dealers and their privates among.
Now there's so many chats.
Now I think it's kind of faded.
It was fun when there were 4.
During COVID, it was great. I mean, and it was like a frenzy, like in the 80s. It was the same thing, but for the chat. Sold. Someone put a Patek 50, 5004. Sold, And I'm talking $500,000, $1 million watches sold on these chats, which is phenomenal. Like, it was hard to believe what was going on, the frenzy of it.
Now, I want to come back to your estate story, your estate sale, because one of the most common questions I get is, where do you find your watches?
Right.
So I'm asking you, where do you find your watches?
Well, it's, I can't give all my trade secrets.
Of course.
But I've been doing this a long time and know a lot of people and have a lot of contacts. And basically, you get people just that know you for a long time. They offer you watches constantly, and I have a network of people I work with, and a lot comes from that, or word of mouth, or in the local community, people know that I do it. They offer me vintage watches around the world. People, I just bought a watch out of England last week, a very important watch that the guy heard about me, and he called me, and I bought the watch. So I get calls like that all the time.
That's fantastic.
I'm not out there like some of the modern day dealers, like doing TikToks, and I'm not a big YouTuber at all, and I'm sure those people are getting calls because they're famous. I'm not into that part of the market, but I get them from my network of people, my reputation. I do go to auction sometimes. I buy at auction. An auction, there's some great auction stories too.
We'll get there in a second.
That I've had, and auctions are funny because, depends who shows up at the auction.
Yes.
What could happen? It could be a good day, a bad day, depending if you're buying or selling. It's
What's the one auction story that you do not want to share right now? The first thing that comes to your mind.
Don't want to share?
Yeah, because those are the good ones usually.
I can't think about that.
All right, then share the one you want to share.
Let me think about one. Well, the ones, that are tough are, you think, like say I can sign a watch to an auction and you think it's just going to kill it, and then it just becomes a dud.
Yeah.
And that's frustrating.
It's heartbreaking.
But then you get the surprises. And I have one auction story that it's one for the for the books for me. Maybe not for everybody, but so I bought this watch in Germany once for a client of mine. A friend and a client. It was a Movado Polyplan. I don't know if you ever heard of the Polyplan.
Yes. Is it the
It's
curved one?
a long Curvex watch. The movement is on 3 planes. It's a huge watch, long rectangular, probably like 55 millimeters long, but narrow. A friend of mine wanted it, and I paid about $7,000 for it, and I sold to him for $7,500. Just help pay for something, And after a couple months, he's like, "No, Matt, I really don't like it. Can you take it back?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure," because it was like a $10,000 watch, really. So it was white gold. I put a white gold band on it. I had a store at the time and sold it for probably about $14,000 with a white gold band on it. Some lady bought it and, "Oh, it doesn't work," returns the watch. Put it in my safe for a couple of years. I didn't really care about the watch anymore. I was like, "Oh my God, I bought it for this guy. He doesn't sell this lady. She returns it." I'm like, "All right." So I think it was Orel was in Miami and when he was working at Christie's, and I gave him a few watches for the auction, and I said, "Can you just take this Movado? I don't care if it brings 500, 1,000, 4,000, 3,000. I don't care. Just put it in there. I don't want to see this watch anymore." So puts it in there. I go to Geneva for this particular sale and starts going. It's like 5,000, 7,000, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000, 50,000, 70,000, 100,000, $125,000. This watch brought at the auction.
Goodness.
And I'm like,
and you were sitting in the room watching this unfold.
I'm watching. When it got to 25,000, I was in shock, but 125,000. The story was amazing. The fact that it's something that I didn't care if it brought $500 and it brought $125,000. So.
And you were paid.
I was paid, and it was probably.
There you go.
So that's why I'm saying at auction, anything can happen on any day. The two guys with two big egos showed up that day.
Yes.
And, they took it, one of them won it. And it's happened on many things like that. Sometimes you scratch your head, like, how did that bring that? And that's the beauty of an auction. But at the same time, it could be a dud. You could put something in for a low reserve just to get it in the sale, and then it doesn't perform. Or it's hard for me sometimes to put certain things in auction because I step up and pay strong prices for things, and it's probably like an auction price sometimes I pay from a dealer. So anyway, that was a really good auction story. And I have a good auction story. You might have been there. There was a Patek Philippe reference 1518 at Sotheby's. The watch was beautiful. It was in mint condition. Had no archive, and Sotheby's categorized it as a yellow gold 1518. And so bidding on the watch, I previewed the watch, and the hands of the watch and the markers of the watch were pink.
Ooh, interesting.
But the case looked yellow. So when bid on it, so a yellow 1518 at the time was probably worth about $100,000 in the early 2000s. A pink one was probably worth $180,000 to $200,000. Start bidding, won the watch for about $115,000, which was a premium for a yellow 1518. But I knew it was pink.
From the hands and the batons.
Right.
Smart.
Because the patina, when rose gold patinas, it turns yellow.
Mm-hmm.
And I bought a few watches like that as yellow that turned out to be pink. So right there at Sotheby's, no archive, buy the watch, and I sold it to a collector. Literally, I told him exactly the story, what happened. I added $50K to it, sold it, and was really happy. He just put it at Phillips, this particular, and I think it brought about $1.8 million, something like that. So, again, kind of like the World Time story, but, I have to buy and sell within the markets. And a lot of people say, "Oh, you could have made so much more money," or people regret selling. I never have a regret selling something, whether I undersell it, sell it at the market, oversell it. I have no regrets, even if it goes up, because I'm in the business and I have to buy and sell.
It's about the turn. Yes.
Right. So buying and selling at the same time as holding, you probably end up making, as a dealer, more money buying and selling than you do holding and waiting for appreciation. I mean, I've kept some watches Some have appreciated, some haven't. So, things like that.
I'm learning that too. It's about the turn and not to hold.
Right.
Buy and hold can really hurt your business very quickly.
Well, because we need today, comparing to the 80s, remember I told you I was buying $200 watches, $500 watches. The most expensive watches were $5,000 to $10,000. It was so much more affordable.
Yes.
I started with $5,000 in my pocket. That's what I started with, $5,000. But it was easy.
Put those dollars to work.
But it was easy to do that. Today, $5,000 doesn't buy you a coffee almost.
Yeah,
so today I feel for some of the younger dealers because you need tons of cash flow if you want to hold stock or inventory, and a lot of them are taking things on consignment, and that's how they're acquiring their merchandise, taking things because they can no way can afford to stock $100,000 watches, $500,000 watches. I mean, it's very difficult.
On Instagram, so people can find you, you're
Right.
at WireLug, great
Right.
name. But it describes in your, the one sentence bio, which I'm sure you wrote. It says, quote, father, amateur basketball coach, tennis player, sunrise, sunset lover, design junkie, watch hunter, end quote. I just love when people describe their passions in one sentence.
Yeah, it's
So,
pretty much.
does that sum it up?
Yeah, I mean,
And father's number one. Well done.
Absolutely, because I have two young kids. They're like 12 and 14, and I'm heavily involved in their life, and it's like highly important to me. And I took on this basketball coaching.
How's that going?
Oh, now it gives you a lot more gray hair than this watch.
Because I saw the courtside pic on your Instagram, so I mean, you're out there this time of year.
I am out there. Tomorrow I'm flying home at 6 a.m. so I can coach my daughter's basketball game, and it's a lot of fun. Like I'm coaching right now a 12-year-old girl team, and it definitely gives you a lot of gray hair. It's pretty stressful because you got to teach these girls some skill, you got to teach the plays, you got to deal with the parents, and then I get into the fights with the referees. But it is a lot of fun. I just love teaching. Like, it's not about the winning or losing for me. It's more, I see these girls, some of them now, since it's a recreational league, some of them never played, some have played. My daughter's an experienced player, trains a lot and is a good player. So you get, players like my daughter, then you got what I love and the most success is I see them improve. Like a girl that couldn't even make a layup at the beginning of the season now can make a layup easy, or a player that didn't know how to set a pick now can set a pick, and teach them certain skills. And dads and parents are usually coaching, and my approach is to teach them skills, the game of basketball, not so much like the X's and O's. And I've made it to a couple championships, and I haven't won one yet though, and I got to win one. I haven't won.
It's going to happen.
It has to happen. I just have not won the championship yet. But I love doing that, and it's also such a great bond, with your child. Like I saw you at the Miami Beach Antique Show this year with your son, and you said you ran the marathon together. And, it's such a great bond to,
That's what it's all about. And my youngest daughter is the same age as your youngest daughter, and she's playing basketball. So I go to the games twice a week.
Oh, so
I do not coach. But what I love seeing at this age in particular, it is like this pure lessons of life. Because if they play as a team, pass the ball, set the picks, and play some fundamentals, they'll win.
That's true.
If there's one person that's trying to be the hero, they'll lose. Yeah. And there is such a great life lesson in that, which somehow could tell a watch story there. But it's just it's a beautiful metaphor of life. It's about teamwork.
No, it is. So, like, for example, we talked about education and now talking about sports. And I played sports growing up. And to me, I tell people I think sports it helps you in the real world too. And like, for example, I run my company and I have 5 or 6 employees. And playing sports of being like a team has helped run my business. And I've had employees, most of them have worked for me for over 20 years. So, maybe I pay too much, but I think no. But I kind of relate sports to running of a company. Like you said, one person has to be the one on the line that does the blocking.
Mm-hmm.
One person's like the salesman, like the running back or the quarterback. And then one person is, the defensive person that is like the bookkeeper maybe. So like, it's a good way to run your business to compare it to sports.
And speaking of your team, over the years, I mean, you've had some core employees that have literally been with you for decades. And shout out to them for their dedication. And now I know why. You're the coach, and that's why you're on the winning team.
And there's some like ex-employees that have their own businesses in the watch world, and I'm really proud of that. Like they came to me and then they got their experience and then went on their own, and they're very successful. So like, I feel like I was a little bit responsible for that.
That's what it's all about. Well done. So Matt, I know about some of the watches in your personal collection, but I don't know of many. But you dropped a hint earlier that there's one Patek Philippe watch that you will never sell. What is it?
Well, it's fun. I get a question all the time, like, what's a watch you would never sell? And I say it's a very easy answer. It was a watch that my father acquired. It was a Patek Philippe in platinum. It's called the Top Hat. And inscribed on the back of it is Bing Crosby's name.
Wow.
And it's a true story. It's not some made-up, provenance thing. There was a gentleman named Tony Penna. Tony Penna was a very famous golfer. As a matter of fact, like, you see some names back in the 60s, 70s, Wilson or one of the brands, you could buy Tony Penna clubs. He was a very big teaching pro. So Bing Crosby's son was named Nathaniel Crosby. Nathaniel Crosby became a PGA player, and Tony Penna was his trainer or teacher. So Tony Penna, his daughter, worked for my father in the furniture business, and she knew my dad because the owner of the company, and it was so known he collected watches. Oh, I have this old Patek Philippe from my dad that Bing Crosby gave him. And so the daughter presented it to my dad, and my dad bought it. And it's probably a watch just pass on down to my kids, just because Bing Crosby was such an icon. Now, probably the watch value-wise has gone down compared to, say, 25 years ago. Because 25 years ago, more people knew about Bing Crosby. Today, like, you ask probably a 35-year-old collector, do you know who Bing Crosby is? They probably don't know who he is. So, like, the
recognition of the name.
Yeah, is not the same.
Of the legend.
But for me, that doesn't matter. For
and
me,
it was your dad's watch, too.
Exactly. So value-wise, I don't really care. It's more this, sentimental value. And a lot of people, like, sentimental value is a huge part of this business and way more valuable than, a $20 million watch for me. So that's the story of the Platinum Top Hat, the Bing Crosby.
A great story. I have one more Patek question for you.
Yes.
What's the one watch that got away? Is there one Patek that you just have always been searching for? It's a unicorn that you haven't been able to find.
Well, the one, I tell people this many times, is the one Patek Philippe that I really love. And I had an opportunity when Massimo and I were partners to buy one, but it got away at the auction. And it's very cheap in that auction compared. It was expensive then, but very cheap now. So I love the 1518, and we've spoken about a 1518 a couple of times. And I remember my dad having a 1518. He had several of them. I've probably had about maybe 7 to 8 1518s. But it's the stainless steel one that really, I would love a stainless steel 1518. I'd probably just sell everything I have to have a stainless steel 15. I'd go all in, all in. And there was one at a German auction probably 15, 20 years ago, and it brought about $2.2 million.
Oh, a bargain, in retrospect.
But it was expensive, too. But, we were bidding. I think the Italian contingency ended up with it. And now, like, it's probably like a $12 to $15 million watch. But I love the lines of a 1518. The whole setup of the dial, the case, kind of like a Calatrava style case, I'm more of a fan of that than the 2499. I love the 2499, but the 1518 is my favorite model and complication. And stainless steel, bringing that steel metal into the mix is what makes it incredible. It really is. I like I really fell in love at the Patek Philippe Museum with the stainless steel 1526. I mean, it looks so beautiful compared to, the yellow ones or pink. They're beautiful. Like I love a pink on pink 1526. That look is just incredible. But the stainless steel one, I was blown away by it. I loved it.
You never know what message will be on your phone or what could walk through the door next in this business.
It's amazing because I still believe that there is a drawer somewhere in someone's home right now that a very expensive watch is sitting there. And I remember we got a call a long time ago, and these cousins of Henry Graves here in New York City in an apartment had just a box of his pocket watches. And we got the deal. I think you might have been at Sotheby's at the time, and Massimo and I brought the deal to Sotheby's.
I remember that was 1998.
Was it 98? Yes. Yeah, so like they had a shoebox under their bed.
It was literally a shoebox.
Yeah, of Henry Graves watches there. So, I mean, I still believe there's some treasures out there, and that's what keeps us going. Like when you get that one treasure, then you're like, there has to be another one. And that's the whole fever of becoming, a watch dealer. Like I said, I'm a watch hunter, and it's a lot of fun to do that. I love that part, the hunt. I don't like selling watches. I really don't. I like buying watches. I'm like an addicted buyer. And that's my passion more than, I'm not a salesman like, oh, look at it. It's beautiful with the, like in that movie Trading Places when he went to go sell his Piaget. It's a Piaget World Time, And he's trying to sell the pawn shop, and Bo Diddley's like, well, in Philadelphia, it's $50, So
I love it.
It was a great line. So I'm not the salesman type. I'm selling my knowledge, my passion, and that's what sells my watches, not so much the watch itself.
What watch are you wearing today, by the way?
This is a 1920s Patek Philippe. It was retailed by Tiffany & Co.
Oh, wow.
Radium dial. That people are scared of radium. I'm not scared of radium because it's all covered and it's very old, but some people will not buy a watch that has radium on it. They're scared they're going to get cancer or some kind of weird effect, and I have a great story about radium.
Let's talk radium.
So I get a call about 10 years ago. I live in Miami. A guy calls me from Naples, Florida. It's on the West Coast, about 2 hours from Miami. I have this Rolex GMT. It's called the Bakelite GMT. And it was the very first GMT model. And I get the call, and he goes, and it has like the second bezel with it. And I thought it was some kind of scam. I'm like, what is a guy doing with the Bakelite GMT? I thought it was a pawn shop calling me. I'm like, what is? And there was a lot of phony bezels being made, and so I drive over to Naples. I meet the guy at a Chase branch. I look at the watch, and it was put in a lead box since it was born in 1958, maybe the watch, 57. And it was his dad's watch. He puts it in a lead box from 1957 to today because he was scared that the radium was going to cause him cancer.
So the condition of this particular
I pull out the watch, my heart starts throbbing. It's like a new old stock GMT big like bezel, and he had a second bezel with it. I'm like, why do you have a second bezel? Oh, there was all this fuss about this watch. The whole news was at my house because of this watch, and I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Oh, my dad sued Rolex because he thought the radium was going to give him cancer.
I remember hearing about that, and it was on the news. I mean,
yeah, and
archives.
And I go, what's your dad's name? He gave me his name, and then I Googled it. His dad was the one who sued Rolex.
That's insane.
And he lost the lawsuit, but Rolex gave him that second bezel that didn't have radium in it. So it was sold. When I sold the watch, I sold it with both bezels, the replacement tritium bezel and the radium bezel.
And what did it bring?
At the time, probably a couple $100,000 at the time.
What's it worth today?
It's hard to tell, but I'm sure probably mid-3s to 400, I would say. at the time. A normal one, so let's put it in perspective. I sold it for 200. A really nice, decent one was probably worth 80 at the time. So I got like more than double at the time for the watch.
Amazing. One last question. Do you have any parting thoughts for us or any like words of wisdom for people that want, where do they go to learn more about watches, where they can go learn about you? Where could they find you?
So I don't think you've been to my office.
No, I haven't.
So I've had an office on Miami Beach since 2006. Like I said, I'm moving to Coral Gables. It's going to kind of be like a man cave of watches, which I already am, but this is going to be more of that. And, I'm going to have like a nice lounge with a pool table, and it's going to be very cool. Kind of like my old store was with design. And I'm not selling the design. What happened was we opened up the watch store, and we put a desk like this in there this is where we would work, and people would come in. How much is that desk? How much? It's not for sale. How much is that lamp? It's not for sale. So finally I said, screw it. I'm going to sell the desk.
Everything's for sale.
I sold the desk. Went out, got another desk. Before you know it, I'm in like the design furniture business as well. So this is going to kind of be like that, but I am not selling the pool table.
Good.
I'm not selling the desk. I don't want to get into that business again because it's a pain to sell furniture, the storing of it, restoring of it. And so it's just going to be, I'm going to have some great watch events there, like wine and watches or omakase and watches, and bring the local collectors in. And at my office, you can learn a lot because I have tons of stock. Probably have over like 2,000 watches from different genres and tons of watch reference books. And you can really come to me and my staff, even Allie, who's worked for me 20 years, Morgan. We teach a lot of people about watches right at our own office.
Sounds like it's time to make a trip to Florida.
Yeah, so wait till I get settled in the Gables.
All right.
And I'll wait to have an event for you to come.
Absolutely. Love to come down there.
Probably like maybe during the beach show, Miami Beach Antique Show, maybe I'll do something over there, like a little cocktail or something.
Early 2025.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Matt, I want to thank you so much for your time today. This was an absolute pleasure. And
I'm honored that you interviewed me.
And thanks for being here. And I want to thank our listeners for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe so that you do not miss any future episodes. This is John Reardon for Collectability.